everybody. Thank you for being here today as we kick off our education hour, 11:31. So we're going to get started. Come on in. I think we'll just start with a word of prayer. Good and gracious God, speak to us and speak through us. Send your spirit now that we would hear how you are at work in the world in ways that we can't fathom, and help us to heed your call. Help us to find ways to remain close to you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Yeah. Okay, so this is sort of it's not quite travelogue, it's a little travelogue, it's a little sort of what happened during the 3 months, it's a few reflections, it's kind of personal, it's also how does this affect PPC, so it's a kind of a hodgepodge, which is what I want to do with kind of a hodgepodge person, but I came up with the idea of for sabbatical of prayer, pilgrimage, and play, because I liked the alliteration. And I also wanted to sort of go on pilgrimage, go somewhere. A lot of my colleagues have done the Camino, which is that hike through Spain, I guess it is. Portugal. Yeah, and everyone's like, oh, we did the Camino. It's like, you have to do the Camino. And I thought, okay, I'm not doing the Camino. I applied for several grants to try, because the Lilly Foundation has this phenomenal grant that you can get as a pastor to fund your heart's desire, whatever you want. So I was going to do that, and I missed the deadline. Oh. I contacted them. I said, I'm just past the deadline. Can I still send it in? No. Okay, so then I applied for another grant, which was a leadership grant, and it specifically said, do not apply for this for sabbatical. But I applied for it because I thought they won't know. They didn't get it, so they must have known. And so I thought, I'm going to cobble this together my own way. And my father died in 2022 and left me some cash. And so I put that cash toward the Italy part. And the congregation funded I have a study leave. So I used my study leave from the congregation. I have for study leave, I think I have $2,000. And then the sabbatical, the congregation funded like $3,500. Just it was set aside. Can't remember how much, like $500 a year, maybe for 6 years, something like that. Anyway, so I cobbled it together to fund and decided I was going to just do partly pilgrimage, part and definite play. We need to play. I don't play enough. And prayer is what I rely on greatly. So I had that sort of my rock foundation. So that's how that came about. This is a picture of John Paul and me at La Verna, which is the a monastery, a Franciscan monastery in the mountains of Tuscany, where St. Francis experienced his stigmata, which means he had a visceral experience of the Lord's presence in his life. And St. Francis, part of my focus was following some of the footsteps of St. Francis of Assisi. So this is my general bearing, my general being is gratitude, having had this time, supreme gratitude. Time is such a gift. And what I realized was I have not been free for 30 years. So I don't know if this makes any sense, but so I've been taking care of children and churches and adults, parents, aunts, uncles, older adults for my whole life. And I know many of you can resonate with that. And so this was the first time I didn't have to take care of anyone except myself. I've never had that feeling ever. And so that I was so grateful for that. This gift of uninterrupted time, for the PPC staff for carrying on while I wasn't here. I know they picked up a lot. I'm so grateful to God, just renewing that connection with God, and so unbelievably privileged that I have faith. I know for some people it's so hard to have faith. I've had lots of conversations with people who say it's just hard to have faith, and I don't find that hard. So I'm so grateful to God for that. For my pastoral vocation, I had a cyst removed from my head, health professionals who took care of that, grateful for that. And just for this leisure time with family and friends. This is a picture at Bagno Vignone Piazza. It's a natural hot spring. So there are lots of piazzas in Italy where there's a fountain and there's cobblestones and people gather. And this is the piazza in Bagno Vignone, which is a hot spring. And so people used to be able to go to this hot spring and swim in it or wade in it. It's you no longer do that. And there's hot springs not far from here where you can go and take advantage of the spring, the natural springs, the natural hot springs. But we discovered this town because on one of our train rides, we met a guy who's a professor at Hopkins, and he's also part Italian, and he was in Italy for teaching. And he said, "Oh, you have to go to Bagno Vignone if you're going to be in Tuscany, because it's so unusual that the piazza is this hot spring." So that was how we happened to end up in this town, and it happened to be when all four of us were together. Okay, so what's been going on during the 3 months I was away? As I said, prayer, pilgrimage, play, and the centerpiece of the three was pilgrimage to Italy, where we spent a month, but pilgrimage sort of interwove in the three during the 3 months. Play, I celebrated my niece Graciella's graduation from Tufts. We did a niece aunt trip to New York City, and instead of giving her a graduation gift, I gave her the gift of time with me. So we went and saw 2 Broadway musicals because that's what she loves, and I love, both of us. And so we did that, and that was just, again, so freeing to be able to do that midweek. And that was part of the play part. I keep up with my Davidson friends. You all have heard about sort of the girls' trips that I take on occasion. And so we did a longer trip since I had sabbatical and I was able to stay for the weekend. Usually I leave early from our girls' trips because I can't stay for the Sunday. So we did a week trip to Smith Mountain Lake, where one of my friends has a house. And then Kitty and Keith, Cowie and Keith Rust gave us tickets to the DC City Tennis Open. So John Paul and I had a day there. And that was just delightful because I love to watch tennis, and it's a sort of local tournament. I'm sure many of you know about it, but they have this like fancy box seat, and so with their names on it, we felt so special being able to do that. And some of John Paul's friends from school were there, from Swarthmore were there, so we met up with them. So it was just a wonderful day. We had visits from family, Paul's brothers who live in Florida and California now. They came with their families, and again, was just able to be fully present to family when they came for a visit, because I wasn't feeling like, okay, I've got to get ready for Sunday, or I've got to whatever I have to do. So it was this wonderful freedom and playful time. The prayer part was, and as I say, these three interwove, but specifically I visited with my nephew Blake and his wife Casey and their son Caden, who's about 18 months now. And Casey has a very serious sarcoma and has had several surgeries and is struggling greatly, and they need round-the-clock care. And so they have care pretty much covered except for when Blake's out of town. And so I was able to spend several days with them while Blake was traveling, and talk with Casey about what's going on and pray with her for her. So that was sort of a prayerful time. They live in New York City, or no, they live in Oyster Bay Cove, New York. And then I had the sister moved. It's benign. It was not anything big. I didn't make a big mountain out of a molehill. So it was fine. John Paul was teasing me the whole time, like, well, "You're fine, Mom." I know I'm fine, but I had it removed, and it went well. So I'm so thankful for medical. I was told I'd have black eyes and I'd be, having to lie down for a long time and have the blood rush and everything. So I wanted to just be on my own for that and not be meeting with people or preaching and having these black eyes. So got that done during this time while I was away. And then I participated in a directed silent retreat at Loyola on the Potomac, which is a Jesuit retreat center in just south of La Plata, Maryland, right out. It's on the Potomac before it goes into the Chesapeake. And I spent a week there in silence, and then I met daily with a director who would pose questions about how, sort of the kind of questions we did today. Where was there extreme delight, and where are you struggling? Where is there struggle? And so we'd sort of talk about that daily. This butterfly is a picture from that directed retreat. I found this beautiful butterfly garden, and it really just spoke to me, this butterfly garden. I couldn't get enough of it as a sort of a metaphor for the freedom that I was feeling, and the freedom that these butterflies and bees have, and to do what God created them to do. And how can I claim that as one of God's glorious creatures, to do what I'm created to do and delight in it? The way that the butterflies and bees are, and we're told bees are extinct, and the butterflies were losing butterflies, but they were in abundance here. And so it was just like all these metaphors of how can I capture the beauty of this, what I was seeing. So the butterflies, a little bit of a metaphor for my time away. So the book that I read this book, What is Ignatian Spirituality? And I referenced it in my sermon today. And the quote from that book that I appreciate is this: "Pilgrims are not wanderers, vagrants, or aimless travelers. They have a set destination, though the roads may be many and varied in getting to the destination." And that was the idea with this idea of pilgrimage. Yes, I was going to Italy, and yes, I was sort of following the footsteps of St. Francis and Clare, but there wasn't like, okay, I have arrived once I got there. The idea is that every day was sort of an unfolding discovery of where God was at work, or where we were being led to go. The Via Francigena, which is this sign, we would see it regularly. It's translated the road from France. This is a picture taken in San Gimignano, Francesca, I don't know if I'm saying that right. San Gimignano. Paul kept correcting my Italian. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, and so this the Via Francigena is this ancient pilgrim route from Canterbury to Rome. It goes through England, through France, through Switzerland, through northern Italy, and it ends at St. Peter's in the Vatican, and it's 2,000 kilometers, or 1,240 miles, and it's the route the Archbishop of Canterbury took in the 10th century to visit the Pope. And so when they have these signs sort of sprinkled throughout, when I saw this, I was like, yes, we're on a pilgrimage with some of these others who have done pilgrimages for centuries. And so I felt so connected with faithful ones who've gone before to search God, to look for meaning, to travel a path that's maybe difficult and unknown. So it's sort of a very broad understanding of pilgrimage, but anyway, this was in San Gimignano in Tuscany. So when I set out originally, I was inspired by Saint Francis and Clare. I wanted to be in the land where these saints were formed, in the space in Tuscany. And they're both from Assisi. They both led a life of comfort and left that to claim poverty, hospitality, healing. They both formed communities, Francis and Clare, and this photo is the inside of the Cathedral of San Rufino in Assisi, where Francis and Clare were baptized as children in 1197. Rufino was the bishop of Turkey who arrived in Assisi in the 3rd century to preach, and then he was driven out. He was martyred, and then this cathedral was built above a pagan temple dedicated to the Roman goddess of fertility and nature. So you can sort of see ruins underneath when you're in the cathedral of the pagan temple. And so some of you may have been here and have seen this already, but it was these are the two saints that sort of inspired my wanting to go to Tuscany. And I was thinking I would we'd stay in Assisi, but then broadened it out from there. So our home base I broadened it out. So our home base was Arezzo. And it turned out when we arrived in Arezzo, we found the Basilica of St. Francis. So, and there's this wonderful museum there dedicated to his memory. So St. Francis traveled throughout Tuscany, made pilgrimage all around the area, and Umbria, because Assisi's in Umbria. And housed in our hometown was these Legend of the True Cross frescoes. They were inspired by sort of this golden legend, which tells the story of a piece of wood that was used to create a cross that Jesus was crucified on, that grew out of the branch of God of Adam's mouth in his death. It's like this beautiful interweaving legend about this piece of wood. And these frescoes are gorgeous, and they're in the cathedral that in our little hometown that we happen to end up in. I didn't know that this was going to be the case, but we have this Cathedral of St. Francis in Arezzo, where we stayed. And also in this basilica, where it's not the cathedral, it's the basilica, there's a difference, but it doesn't matter what the distinction is. Also in this basilica were paintings by Laurentino D'Andrea. And so he collaborated with Piero della Francesca. And so again, it was like, we're home. This is a D'Andrea in our little town in Arezzo, who was the artist. So it just seemed each step of this pilgrim journey, there were reminders for me of God with me, God's provision, encouraging me along the way. I didn't know St. Francis had this church in Arezzo. I didn't know that Laurentino D'Andrea was a notable artist in Arezzo. So we went to this basilica the first day that we arrived in Arezzo, and so it was like the confirmation. Okay, we're meant to be here. Again, it's that paying attention to how God is at work in your life, where you see God's resonance, God's spirit, or God's voice, or God's presence. That's what I was trying to do while away. So as I said, we made our home base in Arezzo. We stayed in this villa here. You can see at the bottom. And the view from our villa was the view of the cathedral, that gorgeous sunset view up there. That was the view from the upstairs of our home. And then the sunset view is where Paul and I are there. It was like stunning sunset every night. And just this reminder of God's grandeur and glory and beauty all around. This is the piazza in Arezzo, where the four of us are, and Beverly and John Paul are here. So it's this lovely town. It's not really a tourist town in Tuscany, and not a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to Arezzo. And so that was one reason we chose it, was it's a good sort of jumping off point to visit other places in Tuscany. There's a train there, there's a bus station. It's a cosmopolitan town in the sense that there's it's not just sort of in a little countryside and there's only the old city, but there's other, grocery stores and things that you can go to. And there's a famous monthly antiques market in Arezzo. Some people know Arezzo by that. The antiques market, and people come from all over Italy all over Europe to go to this antiques market, apparently. We were there. We arrived at the day of the antiques market. We arrived, it was on a Sunday or Monday, I guess. And John Paul, my son, likes antiques. Like, he likes these kinds of things. Me, not so much. But so he was very excited. So I was like, okay, we're gonna first go to this cathedral, this St. Francis. I can't believe we have this Basilica, St. Francis. And it was the first Sunday of the month when all the museums are free. You don't have to pay to enter. So I said, we're going to go to St. Francis Cathedral, and then we'll go and look at the antiquities, the markets, and we'll, it's all over the, okay. So we did that, but took a while in the museum. It took a while in the cathedral. The time we got out, people were starting to pack up their things. Oh, I felt terrible, but anyway, we did get to see some of the antiquities and the what happened?
You get the best prices at that point.
Yeah, exactly. We got to see some of them, and so. But anyway, we had to learn how to travel. We were mostly a threesome. Beverly joined us for a week. Otherwise, Paul and John Paul and I were together. So we kind of had to learn to balance the things that we wanted to do. I definitely wanted to visit churches. That was like my primary thing. I definitely wanted to get to Assisi. I wanted to sort of embrace the culture of pilgrimage. And so we had to sort of balance some of those things together as a family. We started out in Rome. We arrived on June 1st for the Pope's first public mass in St. Peter's Square, and it was a mass for families, grandparents, children, aunts, and uncles. And Rome was extra crowded with pilgrims for this, they call it a Jubilee year. The idea of Jubilee that the Catholic Church has is based on these years in Jewish history. Every 50 years, as Scripture says, as opposed to every 25 is a Jubilee year. But in the Catholic Church, they call a Jubilee every 25 years, and they're intended to be marked as a time to reestablish proper relationship with God, with one another, with creation. And it involves the forgiveness of debts. I don't know if you remember, like 25 years ago, there was a big discussion about should debts of poorer countries be forgiven. And that was the Jubilee year. There was a conversation about that. And so this year, the popes declared the year of Pilgrims of Hope, trying to reclaim that idea of hope. Each year, it's like a different theme. So they had special doors that were open on basilicas, on sort of major churches that are only open every 25 years. They are covered over with brick on the years that are not Jubilee doors, and so you can enter through those doors. Rome was a madhouse. There was pilgrims, people, tourists everywhere, and so we just kind of had to, enter into that flow. And so when we found out that the mass was for families, we thought, okay, maybe we're a family, we'll go. And they set up all these chairs outside the St. Peter's. They're like, you have to get there very early. So we got there very early. We went through security. We got chairs. It was blazing hot. There were 60,000 people there. and yet it was so uplifting. People were singing. People were sort of peacefully milling about as we were waiting for the service to start. And then once it started, there's flags from every country in the world. They had their little, some had their Jubilee flag, some had their country flag. And Pope came around in his Pope mobile. That's what this middle picture of John Paul and I, you can kind of see him waving. He's the little teeny picture. People were chanting Papa Leone. So excited to be there. And it was elevating. I mean, it took a lot of, you know how sometimes those things that you do take a lot of trying to get there, get up early, burning hot, blah blah blah. But when they're there and you're in the middle of it, it was wonderful. It was just this wonderful experience to be in St. Petersburg celebrating Mass. They served communion to 60,000 people or whoever wanted to take it. So and I wrote down this quote in introducing this Pilgrims of Hope year. It was Pope Francis who did this. They introduced the Jubilee in December 2024. It goes from December 25, 2024 through December 25, 2025. He said he hopes the year draws Catholics toward patience, which he described as a virtue closely linked to hope, yet can feel elusive in our fast-paced world. We are used to wanting everything now. And felt like, there was a sense of hope, and we need to sort of claim that hope and proclaim that hope, even when it feels like everything's going to hell in a handbasket. It just, that was sort of part of what I experienced in that square. Turned out Kara, Bobby, and Charlie Trenkamp were there as well, but we didn't see them. They somehow John Paul knew that they were there. They whatever. So I talked with Kara about that after, but that was kind of neat. So that was sort of our first day in Rome. And then so my family is a big Lego family, like so much to the point that we have Legos going up our stairs because they don't take them down after they make them. So we've got this whole village. Don't ask. So the Lego store happened to be right near our hotel. So we had to go into the Lego store, of course. And there's this Lego Trevi fountain. And then we went to the real Trevi fountain. So that was kind of cool, actually. And then Cindy Mammalian sent me a list of what you have to do when you're in Rome, or at least what the Mammalian family did when they were on their Italy travels. And she said, you have to have a gelato a day at least. We did. We like truly, the gelato was like out of this world delicious. And the tourist sites in Rome were super busy, but it was still a thrill, still such a thrill to see the Sistine Chapel and the Raphael rooms. John Paul had done a puzzle. He's a puzzler of the School of Athens. And so this is John Paul in front of the real painting of the School of Athens in the Raphael rooms at the Vatican Museum. So that was a thrill for him and for all of us. It felt like, so at Christmas, I went to Rockefeller Square with Beverly, and we had to sort of elbow our way through to get to that Christmas tree that in the center at Rockefeller Square. We just were like trying not to be those people. But if you want to sort of see it, you kind of have to go with these places. That's what it felt like being in Rockefeller Center at Christmas time. It being in Rome at the Trevi Fountain and these places. So you just had to sort of settle in that this is what we started. So we started our pilgrimage and ended our pilgrimage in Rome. We spent 4 nights at either end, and we tried to make contact with Mark Shalaby, who lives there, but he travels, and we were, only in Rome so much. So we just talked. We didn't actually see him, but next time. And what was kind of cool, we learned that his wife is from Anghieri, which is the town right next to Arezzo, and she grew up right there. So, and they're building a house there. So, telling you that if you want to go to Tuscany, Mark Shalaby has a house there. Yeah, sorry, Mark. But anyway, he couldn't have been nicer, but we didn't get a chance to actually see him. So Tuscany, and specifically Orvieto, is the slow movement hometown. Now, Francesca, I asked her, who has Italian roots, where in Italy, in Tuscany, do we not miss? And she said, I heard Orvieto and I've been to Orvieto, and it's a great little town. So we went before we got our car, we went to Orvieto. This is the amazing cathedral there in Orvieto. It's this ancient town that you take a funicular in the old city to get up to, because it's a fortified city. And like I said, this is the slow life movement hometown. So the idea is that you eat local food, you eat food that's in season, you don't rush through the day, you try to get everything done, you take your time, you savor the sights and the sounds. There was this sort of gorgeous, imposing cathedral. And so we tried to sort of embody that slow life movement while we were in Tuscany. We went to this town, Città di Bagnoregio, which is the town that in the corner where there's that walkway to get up to it. There was an earthquake, so part of the town fell down. So there's no longer a path to drive to get there. You walk to get to the town, but it's the home of St. Bonaventure. And I read some of St. Bonaventure in seminary. And he was dedicated to sort of rebuilding the church and thinking about how best to be a faithful churchgoer. And so that was really fun to see that's his hometown. He's sort of a Christian mystical writer. He was a pastor. He was a philosopher priest. And he wanted he wrote about and wanted to share the Franciscan, he was a Franciscan as well, inspired by Francis, experience of intimacy with God, not only with the monks and priests, not only with the sort of ordained folks or those in the church, but also with ordinary people, so that ordinary people can know about God's love through head, heart, and hands. So seeing his hometown was a wonderful discovery. I didn't know Bonaventure was from Città di Bagnoregio. Again, it was one of these towns that someone said, have to see this town. It's and there's just this wonderful connection with the church and with church thinkers. So we visited so many churches, and it was every church just about was breathtakingly beautiful. So I found Arezzo through this woman named Paola, who's a travel agent, who is a friend of a friend. And she knew I was sort of looking to follow in the footsteps of St. Francis. And she said, okay, there's a walk for peace that you may want to do. And I would invite you to come with me to do it. And so I thought, sure, I can walk. I like peace. We're going to do that. I did not know, again, what I was getting myself into, but we walked with thousands of students from Arezzo to this place called Rondine, which is just outside of Arezzo, where there's a school for peace and reconciliation. And the founder of this Rondine school is Paola's daughter's father-in-law. So she had this sort of direct connection. He's the guy in the newspaper there shaking hands with the president. So we walked and walked and walked and walked. It was only a 5K, but I'm like in my cute sandals and not thinking I don't know what I was thinking, but I don't know. I just didn't realize what I was getting myself into. But it was one of those things where I'm glad I said yes while I was doing it. I thought, what was I thinking? And then afterwards, I was really grateful to be exposed to this organization that brings the vision of Rondine is to bring people from warring nations together, to live together, to eat together, to break bread together, to learn together, literally in this town. just outside of Arezzo, so that they can then take those practices of reconciliation, of conflict resolution, of peace building back to Sudan or back to war zones, places of conflict where they themselves are living. And this is the idea was how the method for creative transformation of conflict in every context. So then part of what we did was walk across this bridge, which is right outside of Arezzo, and that's the bridge that is used in the Mona Lisa, the background, when Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. That's the sort of the background. He was active in this area. So that's right outside of Arezzo. We walked across that bridge, and then the image for Rondine, like the image they use is the swallow. There are swallows all over Tuscany, and it's known for this agile flight and stunning migration. I don't know exactly why, maybe because they're all over the world. So we got to Rondine, we took this walk, got to Rondine. It was with all these students. That's what these pictures are of. And then I had to find some place to sit down in some shade. So I was like, you do you, I'm gonna go up here. But we did get to hear the president speak, and the president of Rondine and the president of Italy. And so it's kind of a big deal. And then after I got home, I was telling Paul and John Paul, everything about it. And the next day we're at the marketplace, and these people gave us their newspaper because they just asked if we wanted their newspaper. And on the front page of the newspaper is this event that I had just participated in. So I felt so with it. And there was all kinds of articles about what's happening in Rondine. It's just been acknowledged as a UNESCO method for conflict resolution. So yeah, there's some good things, really good things happening that I was open to the experience. And I was just, that's how God was working in this sabbatical. I don't know how Rondine will play a role in our lives here, but we know about this organization, and it's an amazing organization doing good things toward peacemaking. So it is a big deal, and yeah, grateful for that experience. Then on Pentecost, we celebrated at just our local church, which was near our home in Arezzo, and we walked in, and the guy in charge of worship, it wasn't the priest, some person just said, "Would you like to do the readings today?" to us. And so usually I don't mind standing in front of a congregation and doing readings or speaking, but I was like, no way. So, but I said, my husband would be happy to do that. Paul has a little bit of Italian. I don't know where he kind of is able to do it, and he pulled it off. He led the prayers in this little church. We were just all so proud of him. But that's one method for engaging people who walk through the front door that you don't know. Right, that's a good question. Do they ever come back? Not to that congregation. But so that was what they did. And at this church was a D'Andrea fresco. And this was the church that's right near, it's Santa Maria della Grazia, right near our villa where we were staying. So again, it was this sense of we're meant to be here. And it was sort of God using, being open to the way that the Spirit felt like the Spirit was moving. That's there. The three of them are standing in front of that D'Andrea fresco, the one that's kind of cut off over there. And then we just found these wonderful literal picture windows. So as we were touring Tuscany, we drove by this castle. I think it was on our way back from Cortona. This Cortona is like right near Arezzo. We went to Cortona one night, Paul and I. And then John Paul said, you know, there's this castle. What is that castle? Let's go visit the castle. So literally we went and visited this castle. That's what that picture is of the four of us. It's a, they gave us a tour of the gardens, and then we stopped in this cute little town where there was this open air picture window, and Beverly's saying, people live here, you know, it was just so beautiful. And so we got some family photos in front of that picture window, and it was like this tiny Tuscan town. And at the restaurant where we had our pizzas, there was a group of people celebrating Pentecost, and everyone saying "Buona festa, buona festa," and it was a big deal that it was Pentecost. Everyone was celebrating Buona festa. That's what they do, right, Francesca?
They're always celebrating.
They're always celebrating. So that was how we spent Pentecost, which was kind of fun. Then we just toured. I had a list of towns that I wanted to see in Tuscany. Some were related to Francis and Clare, some not. Some so these are just sort of tiny towns with gorgeous churches, flowers everywhere. Pienza was home to Pope Pius II. He wanted his town on the map, so we built this gorgeous church and a piazza for all to see. Montepulciano is reminiscent of Florence with its Piazza Grande. You can sort of see that structure that reminds you of Florence. Monticello had flowers everywhere that someone just recommended we go. There was a foot race underway in Monticello, so we really wanted to get ahead of that because these roads are narrow, and if you get behind the foot race, you're stuck for good. So we didn't really stay long in Monticello. We drove through the gladiator fields. I don't know if you've seen that movie Gladiator, but these are the fields where Russell Crowe is sort of running. See that? So we researched where that was. Every town in Tuscany has a church of St. Francis. Simple, then usually it was sort of a simple, lovely, and often demarcated by that Franciscan cross, sort of a simple wooden cross. Every town pretty much is broken into quadrants where spectacles happen, where they have jousts or fights or games against each other, competitions, and you can enjoy the competition and the celebration. And you know that the quadrants of these little teeny towns by the flags that are hanging. And so in our little town, Arezzo had this joust that they have, one in June and one in September, and we happened to be able to go and get tickets, and it was just like, it's such a spectacle, but wonderful, playful, and they've been doing it for years. And so we just kind of entered into that part of life in Tuscany and in Arezzo. And then we also did always sort of encounter Francis, and then in Siena, these are the steps that Catherine of Siena took to get from the in and out of the hospital. She was a saint who all had mystical visions of God, but also was a healthcare provider. And so those are Catherine's steps. I was wearing my nurse's uniform, John Paul liked to call it. I bought sort of special, like, comfortable pants and a comfortable shirt, and John Paul thought I looked like a nurse. So I'm standing in front of Catherine of Siena's steps. We went to Certaldo, which is the home of Boccaccio, who wrote the Decameron. And so that was kind of a nice discovery. In San Gimignano, this the town of towers. We had another gorgeous sunset. It's just constant beauty and discovery. We visited Volterra, where they have these alabaster artisans still doing the artisan today. Everyone's creating something lovely. They have a craft like a ceramic or a jewelry or a furniture. And that was kind of different from sort of our setting here. So, yeah. Then we went to Assisi and Laverna. There are these Andrea della Robbia ceramics all over the churches there, which are stunning. That, and Assisi has, we started out in the little church. I'm sure some of you have been to Assisi. There's a little church that's erected around where Francis's ministry took place. And then there's a much larger church. It's called Church of the Holy Angels. That's sort of around that little church where Francis began his ministry. And there's this special rose garden where it's the legend is Francis threw himself on the roses, and now the roses grow without thorns. We visited the church where Claire had her ministry. It's the Church of San Damiano, and it was sort of very moving to see sort of their simple lives, how they sort of forsook opulent living, dedicated themselves to serving Christ through serving others. That hymn that we sang, the first hymn this morning, was based on St. Francis's Canticle of the Sun, brother moon and sister sun, sort of calling all of nature, all of the creatures as siblings or mother or father, as part of the family, the human family. And that was sort of Francis's vision of that all of creation is part of what God's gift for us, for all. We ended up our day in this is the church down there where there's a crypt, beautiful frescoes depicting Francis' life. And then Laverna is where he got stigmata, and that's sort of the cloth that still has some of the stigmata on it. It was just to be reminded of faithful followers of Christ who live simple lives. I mean, people have erected glorious churches in honor of these people who live simple lives. That the tradition, the church continues. That was part of what we pulled out of it. And places were packed with pilgrims, packed with people just wanting to see some of these beautiful holy places. Then we also went to Lucca, Anghieri, Florence, Rome, Pompeii. Those are just some. Lucca, there's these trees up on a tower. That was kind of unusual. Florence and Rome, just like gorgeous art in every nook and cranny. Recognize the Pietà. It's behind a big plexiglass wall. You may know that because someone tried to deface it or deform it. Then Anghieri is where all these flowers are. That's where Mark Shalaby is building his home. And then it just, what is this, Pompeii? Oh, shocking discoveries on every street. That's us in Pompeii down there. It was really, really beautiful. Then after the month in Italy, I told you I went to New York City with my niece Grace. Went to Oyster Bay Cove with my nephews Lake, Casey, and Caden. Went to Smith Mountain Lake with my Davidson friends. Went to the Tennis Open with John Paul, and had head surgery. So that was kind of the month of July. And then in August was this retreat at Loyola and the Potomac, and I was reintroduced to Ignatian spirituality, sort of what I was sharing today. And it was a silent retreat, sort of to reflect on my vocation. So I met with the director to talk about daily learnings. There are these gorgeous trails, but you can kind of see this spider web across them. And if you weren't looking, you would run into the web. So it was kind of, and if there was light, you could actually see the impediment. You could see the web, and that was kind of a nice metaphor for light to help see what's the spider webs that are trying to ensnare you. You need the light. And this is also where I discovered that butterfly garden that was so moving, just watching the butterflies and bees doing what they're created to do so effortlessly. That's what I want to do if I can with my with my life. I put down sort of the prayer process of the St. Francis or the Ignatius of Loyola spirituality. Prayer is essential, but prayer leads to deeds. But that's sort of Loyola's St. Ignatius of Loyola's mantra. It leads to change, to work, and to concrete acts of love. So we pray that God will help us to see what we pray for light to see what's in our path. We give thanks that God is in our life. Review the day, as I talked about, what's wonderful, what's awful, and then resolve to do what to do in the day to come. So that's kind of the very simple prayer, Ignatian prayer. So overall, this helped me, I would say, return to my beginnings. I went in the whole reason I went into ministry at the outset was to discover how God's love works, because I was at a time in my life when in 1992 when I was really down, but I knew God's love was real. Like I knew it viscerally, physically, that there's something as such as God's love. And I went to seminary to try to understand what that is. That was why I went to seminary. I didn't know I was going to be a pastor. But I wanted to get to the root of God's love because I knew it was legitimate. It was so this time away sort of reminded me a little bit of that, wanting to get to the root of things. How does God's love work? And my whole reason for being in this world personally, and I'm sure you all have your own sort of this is why I'm here reason for being. My whole reason for being is to seek union with Christ. Like how can I do that? How does that work? And so this time away reminded me a little bit of that. How does that work? How does love work? And how can I be one with God? Part of that is to jump off the anxiety wheel, the success wheel, oh yeah, I've got to do this. I do more and more and more because that's how I can achieve success. And jump off that and just slow down, like that slow life movement a little bit, to listen for God and trust that there's wisdom in the listening. We talked about this at the officer retreat, about maintaining what's essential. And this has to do with sort of our church life. What is essential to us being a faith community? What are the non-negotiable things that we have to do that we know are what God is calling us to do? And what are the non-essentials that we just get rid of, that drain our energy, that make us crazy? So trying to find that balance again as a faith community, returning, and I put equipping the saints for ministry, because we can't do this work that we're called to do in the church. I can't do it without that foundation of knowing that I'm doing this for God and with God. And so how do we reestablish, and how do we that relationship with God that is meaningful and that drives our decisions? One of my friends was telling me about this program that he started at his church, and it's this whole curriculum that everyone does about with prayer and scripture reading and this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh God, it just sounds like a lot. But it's getting at the fundamentals of getting back to how do we need to establish that relationship so that we have the energy and the strength to do what we're called to do as a community. And last thing, I just am so proud of Chris. Like I watched the two funerals. I watched Jerry's funeral. Yeah, beautiful. And I watched Margie's funeral. And they were so different, the funerals. Chris presided at both. There were three people that I recognized at both. The Haugans were at both, and Louise Plum was at both. I saw Marcia was at one at Jerry's. Anyway, I saw, so you can see who's there, as you all know that from watching online. But anyway, and I felt so proud of this congregation that we could have two such very different services and honor the Lord in both of those families' lives, and for both of the deceased, and felt so proud of Chris, at the way that he conducted and led the service and the services. And as I was on this retreat, I was on a bench, and there's these trees, this huge oak tree and this little sapling, and the huge oak tree is kind of going up and dying, and this little sapling is beautiful right next to it. And it was like this image of Chris and me. I've done well mentoring him. I felt like I was super proud of him, and so that was this image of the Chris is sort of taking it on, and so I think he enjoyed it too. So that's what I got for you. Questions or comments or thoughts or.
I lost every minute of your presentation.
Yeah.
What was the highest point of your sabbatical and what was the lowest point?
It's a good question. Really good question. Yeah, I would say, I think so many highs, but if I had to just one that jumped out at me, it would be the Mass at St. Peter's and worshiping with 60,000 people and taking communion in that setting, ecumenical, literal people from all over the world, international. That was probably the height. And probably the low point was visiting with my niece and nephew, who she's very sick. She's 35. She's got a sarcoma. They don't know how she got it. Keeps getting worse. She's had several surgeries. She's this beautiful, accomplished, smart Princeton grad, works in wealth management, and at the top of her game in New York City, and just had her first child, and she is sick as a dog. So and being with them was really hard. Yeah.
Non-Catholics were allowed to take communion.
Well, good point. So when I go to a Catholic church, I ask myself, can I receive this in the spirit that it's meant to be taken? Am I irritated that Protestants aren't allowed at the table? Then I'm not going to take it. Am I open to the idea of transubstantiation? Then I'll take it. So yeah, that's how I reconcile that fencing of the table personally. There also, if it says explicitly only Catholics, only baptized Catholics, then I won't. If there's that comment.
But with 60,000.
So yeah, no, I know that's an issue. It's definitely an issue for Protestants. But that's how I work it, or kind of in my heart. Yeah. Charlie.
How are you different today than before you went on sabbatical?
That's a good question. I am wrestling with this idea of freedom. So that glimpse of freedom that I talked about at the very beginning, and having never had, that was life-giving. So life-giving.
See, all of those of us who are retired.
Do you know that feeling? Is that what it is? Is that what it is? Because I know some people who are retired who are just anxious and don't know what to do with themselves. They're so
Kind of like I was my mom's caregiver for a while, so
Yeah.
I actually got my freedom when she passed.
Yeah. So how can we? So that I'm trying to understand what that freedom, what that means. Yeah. 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 The church needs a retreat.
Yeah.
Florence.
I'm very sorry. But I want to thank everybody. I want to thank this church. On the whole service, Chris. All the years I'm talking about Chris.
Yeah.
What a wonderful service.
They can't take him.
Jury.
Thank you all very much.
Florence, it takes courage to stand up and say that and to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for just showing up because grief is so hard. It's so hard. And it ebbs and flows and it comes and goes and we're here. We are here for you in your grief. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, I was super proud of Chris and I'm so glad that everyone just embraced him and continue to embrace him. Yeah.
Some people say, we wish we can come to your church. I said, it's open, you can come.
Yeah, bring them in, bring them in. Yeah, we welcome your family, your friends with open arms. And if they want to be here to surround you, we would love that. We would love that, even if that's the only reason, or if the only reason is to see Chris, that's fine too.
We loved and enjoyed Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the deacon, faithful man, man of God. So. All right, everybody.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Every year.